All right, welcome everyone to 52 Living Ideas. This is our play series meetup. And tonight we are going to cover Henrik Ibsen's Doll's House, a really interesting play that I hope you will enjoy discussing and sharing some of your insights with us all. So a little bit of background. The play was written in 1879. It immediately attracted a lot of attention and controversy, and I'll talk a little bit about that. The play is, I'm not going to recite the kind of all of the characters or the plot. It's pretty self-explanatory. Just to say, I guess I'll suffice it to say that this is a play about a um, middle-class Norwegian family set around 1870s. Um, and it's kind of a microcosm of society. The setting is a house, as you can probably tell from the title. A doll's house is it's sort of a sarcastic interpretation of that, but everything pretty much happens in a single house, and it becomes a lens into society and some of the issues that Ibsen wants to explore. So why the controversy? Well, of course, you have to say a little bit about what's happening here. So you have this um, middle class family, like I said, that is pretty standard. A husband, wife, a couple of kids. Everybody seems to be content. This is the beginning of the play, and then towards the end of the play, the protagonist Nora, the wife, is ready to or is leaving her kids and the husband, and is seen as this uh, person who is courageously taking the next step to explore, different possibilities. So obviously, in that at the time when it was released and staged, it was a not exactly the most popular idea of women leaving their families and leaving their children, and so there was a lot of both interest and some pushback, an interesting pushback. I want to mention this one story in particular. So, the play was immediately very popular, and people crowded to see it. There were several theaters that wanted to stage it. One of them was a theater in Germany, and there was a famous actress at the time. Her name is Hedwig, Hedwig Niemann, let's call her that. And she was to play Nora. And so she said, I would never leave my children behind. And so I don't want to play it as it is written. And apparently she was such a popular actress, and Ibsen wanted to accommodate her. So he rewrote, just for her, he rewrote the ending. And the ending in the version that they staged initially was, instead of leaving, Thorwald, who is the husband, takes Nora, and they both go to the kids' room, and it's kind of understood that she changes her mind and she decides not to leave. So this immediately tells you how much interest and controversy and just excitement was immediately drawn to this play. So that's one little anecdote that I wanted to convey in the beginning. The other one is that Ibsen uh, mentions this incident in his letters, and he says that he did his play a barbarous violence by rewriting that, because everything in this play is really meant to be leading up to this grand moment when Nora is leaving. And so to rewrite that is to essentially neuter the whole message of the play. Now, what is the message, though? And this is where it becomes very interesting, because, as you might imagine, if you've read it, the women's movement and the feminist movement have really, taken up display as their banner for women's liberation and so on. And interestingly enough, Ibsen himself tried to distance himself a little bit from this type of interpretation. So if you search online, you will probably find there's a free version of Ibsen's letters and speeches. And so there's this famous speech that he makes at a Norwegian what is it called? Women's rights movement or something like that. And anyway, the point there is that he says specifically that it was never his intention to become a voice for the women's movement specifically. What he sees his task as is description of humanity, and he says, "I'm a poet. I'm not an activist," and in so many words. So this, of course, has aroused a lot of contention and again, maybe backlash even. So this is sets the context and the stage for display. It's very interesting how to interpret it. Um, there is an obvious interpretation, and I think there will be also some additional interesting interpretations that we can come up with as we delve into it. So let's see. Right. So I want to mention a couple of things that stood out to me and I thought would be interesting to discuss. And then obviously I'll open up the floor to all the rest of you, and you can share your thoughts, your insights. If you have any questions, then we'll have some opportunity to ask questions and so on. So let me just mention a couple of things. So the play is centered on, I guess, two main protagonists, Nora and her husband, Thorold. Mostly on Nora. The setup, what creates this conflict, what creates the plot essentially, is that Nora uh, goes behind her husband's back out of good intentions, out of an intention to save him, actually, to save him because he needed medical help. And the way to get it was to take a trip to Italy to recover, but they didn't have the money. So she goes behind his back and comes up with the needed sum. And the way she does it is she takes a loan and actually forges her father's signature. Now, even if she didn't forge the signature, the fact that she went behind her husband's back and procured this loan was in itself scandalous, because at that time, women, at least in the middle class, is my understanding, were not supposed to enter into these types of contracts without some sort of male promissory or some party that would guarantee the loan. And the fact that she did this and forged the signature, in addition to that, I mean, she's definitely taken herself out of societal norms. But of course, she does it out of her motive presumably is to save her husband from death. So there's that. Now she's hiding all of this, and Thorold is completely unaware of the money. He thinks it came from. In fact, I'm not even sure where he thinks it came from, but possibly from her father as a loan, which he was unwilling or really not too crazy about taking anyway. He's this sort of self-made man who is very principled, wants to live within his means, doesn't take on debt, does everything the way society wants him to do it. And so he's kind of very much of a Boy Scout type of figure. So what happens next is that the person who's involved in procuring this loan, Krogstad, is now threatening to expose Nora and her husband. And this really sets up the tension in the play. And eventually Krogstad relents, but it's too late because the damage to the relationship between Nora and Thorold is already taking place. And so the play ends with Nora and Thorold having this final conversation where Nora basically lays her cards on the table and says, "Look, our marriage is a sham. You are not the kind of person that I can love. I've always felt that I've been manipulated and essentially have been placed into your house. I lived in my father's house. I was like a doll, and you guys played with me, and you admired my beauty, and now I'm in your house. I've been placed in your house. So she's kind of using this passive voice where she doesn't really have any agency about it. And so, society says that this is okay, but I don't think so. And so I'm going to leave you and venture out and go on to seek other possibilities, essentially. So that's the setup. Now, again, this is very, very um, interesting because the kind of if you haven't read the play and I just gave you this general outline, I think you can form some sort of opinion immediately, whether or not you like it, you don't like it, you agree with the message, you disagree with the message. What's interesting though is this point that Ibsen makes when he characterizes his intent, and he says that his intent is not necessarily to support any particular cause or be a voice of propaganda for any particular standpoint. He wants to portray humanity as it is. And he does it very well, I think, in this play. And there's a lot of really interesting minutia that makes us want to ask a lot of questions about what's really going on here. Who is Nora really? Who is Thorold? Who is this other person, her um, youth friend, Christine, and Thorstad himself? There's a lot of interesting dynamics here with a lot of these protagonists, including the family friend, Dr. Rank, who has some interesting pronouncements to make as well about society and about the role of, um, uh, I guess, the healthy and the diseased in society. So that's uh, a little bit about the setup and the context and perhaps some interesting questions we can explore. I'll bring up a couple of points that maybe we can touch upon if they're interesting to you. If not, then again, you can come up with your own. One interesting point that I find is this idea of Nora being kind of a different person in Act 1 and 2 from her final showdown in Act 3. So I'm curious if you got the same impression that it was so unexpected what she did in the final act. I mean, you meet her, she seems to be happy, she seems to be content, she's enjoying the kids, she's enjoying the family. They're getting ready for Christmas. It's time to arrange the presents. She's getting ready for this dinner and a dance where her husband asked her to dance Tarantella. And then all of a sudden, it seems a complete switch from that jovial, lighthearted, this little plaything to this ruthless, seemingly cold, unfeeling Nora that just says, you know what, I'm cutting my losses and I'm out of here. So I'm curious if you thought it was maybe there was some inconsistency in that character, or if there were warning signals from the beginning that would sort of signal that in fact there's trouble in paradise and something is about to happen. So that's number one. The second question is, of course, the ethical question about whether or not something like this is even praiseworthy or admirable. And that's, obviously that we should probably explore that as well. Is something like that a good thing? Yeah, is it worth leaving your family to reach your human potential? Or is it even self-contradictory? Can you reach your potential by ignoring the things that are duties that are closest to you, they're most immediate? So that's another one. And then I want to maybe explore the relationship between Nora and Christine a little bit closer. So these two women, both around the same age, have some of the same difficulties in a way, but respond very differently and end up in different places completely towards the end. So those are some of the things that I thought were maybe interesting to talk about. Again, you might have something completely different, and I totally welcome that. I'm curious what you thought was intriguing, what you got out of the play, and maybe we can discuss that. So I'll open it up, and what we want to do, since we have a few people here, just type an exclamation point in the chat if you don't mind. That way I can see who is wanting to participate, and then I can call on you in that same order. So if you want to contribute, type an exclamation point in the chat. I will call upon you, and then we can have kind of a round robin discussion of the play. So, or if you're still thinking of questions or what you want to say, then I'll just keep sharing some of my thoughts. Again, there's plenty here, I think, to dig into. So I'm happy to keep going if no one has any contributions they want to make. So I'll give you a minute. Bob, go ahead.
Hi, Philip. I probably saw the play decades ago, so my memory is pretty poor about it. But um, if this were, I realize this was in the end of the 19th century is supposed to take place.
Correct.
If this were the current century, um, uh, I could see this happening. But maybe the woman is dominated throughout her marriage, and so. But maybe it isn't shown too much in the play. But inwardly, perhaps she's just headed up to here, headed up to her nose. And I'm just, just can't tolerate this because of what has happened to the unfairness of the situation. So why shouldn't I leave? In this century, women do this. They walk out the door, right?
Absolutely.
They demand a divorce, or I've had it. I'm leaving. Um, let's see what else. I think when I saw the play long ago, I think the mystery was if she's leaving, what is she going to do? I'm does she have a job on the horizon? Is somebody accepted her for another job, or
Right.
is she going to be destitute? Does she have? I don't remember. If she has any money of her own? What is she going to do? But that's not. Is that absent from the play? The way the play is? Are you left with not knowing? So that's my reaction.
Open-ended, but it's a great observation, Bob, and I'm asking myself the same thing. What is we kind of have the quote the negative program, which is to leave, but what is the positive counterpart of that? In other words, what are you leaving this, but what are you leaving it for? And that's unclear in the play. Um, Now, I should mention perhaps at this point that Ibsen wrote this when Ibsen wrote this, he had a clear prototype for what he wrote. The story that actually the play is based on happened to a friend of his, whose name was, let me check my notes, Laura Keeler. So Laura did pretty much exactly what Nora does in the play. Laura took out a loan to help her husband recover his health in Italy. So it's almost exactly the same plot. Now, here's where it's different. In real life, her husband, Victor, he divorced her. He left her, and not only did he divorce her, but he committed her to an asylum because apparently he thought she was crazy. But this is where it gets even more interesting. So Ibsen, who was Laura's confidant, was very disturbed by all of this. And so he writes this play. The play becomes famous. And obviously Victor, the husband, hears about it, and perhaps he has a change of heart. Well, he does have a change of heart because he begs her or asks her, I don't know, to come and rejoin the family. And she does. She does, and she becomes a successful writer. but of course, she is completely overshadowed. Her own talents are completely overshadowed by the fact that she is the prototype for Nora, which is she's not quite happy about that. So this is again why this play is so interesting. It has all of these little anecdotal angles that connected with real life. So you have women that refuse to play it a particular way. Then you have women who are actually prototypes of the play and of the heroines in the play. So this is fascinating. Uh, Anyone else want to contribute or share some of your insights, what you thought about the play, what perhaps some of these questions that Bob or I mentioned? Don't be shy. Um, while you're thinking, Katie asked, "What is the significance of the title?" Well, the significance of the title is revealed in the last interchange in Act Three, where Nora says that she felt, or she feels like she has been living in a dollhouse, that she is this pretty doll, that she's a plaything, and nobody takes her seriously. And this you can see from the very beginning. And the way you can see it is in several ways, but one is the way her husband calls her. He never calls her anything serious. Like, I mean, and it's a little difficult to be too judgmental there because married couples call each other these diminutive names. There's nothing wrong with that per se, but he always calls her these childish, like childlike names. Like he calls her his little lark, his little songbird, his little dancer. So in other words, he always treats her like she's a child. And even her friend, Christine, when uh, when Nora and Christine meet again, have a little reunion in Act One, Christine says, "Nora, you're a child," and Nora responds, "No, I'm not, and you should not talk to me like this. You should not be so patronizing to me." And so she does feel patronized by her husband. Um, but at the same time, this is where it becomes where again it's interesting. She does seem extremely content and happy. And when she talks to her friend, she says, you know, it's so glorious to be alive and to be happy and to have children and to be able to play with them. And her life is kind of charmed. I mean, she leads a charmed life. She has a maid, a nanny. Her husband is now, has received a promotion. He's respected. She doesn't really like, she's not like she's digging ditches somewhere or working on a plantation. She is enjoying life. They have this beautiful house that is filled with nice things. And but at the same time, obviously, there's something gnawing at her on the inside. Perhaps not. It's hard to tell because what sets it off is this threat of revealing her um, underhand dealings, underhanded dealings, and that sets off this sort of trajectory of demise and reverses her fortune. So it's hard to tell if Krogstad had never appeared there, would she be completely satisfied? It's not clear to me that she wouldn't. But I'm curious what you guys think. Again, I don't want to force my interpretation on you. I'm curious what you thought about Nora and her charmed life in Act One and Two, and then this amazing reversal in Act Three, which is precipitated by this threat of being exposed. And also, what you think of Thorwald? Is he the evil patriarch, or is he a guy who that just basically does what society expects of him? And perhaps today he would be considered somewhat outmoded, but in that society, it's not clear to me that he is a villain. But again, I'm curious what you think. Connie, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't see your. Uh,
Yes, my feelings go to the children when a mother chooses her needs, and I know we're in 2024, but without having the home, um, and how much did it bother her that her children would be, their life would be, did she have any conscience or about them, or was it just all what she wanted for fulfillment? Because it seems like a very unkind thing to to me, especially when the times were not to do something like this, abandon her children, which could leave them with lifelong issues when there's not a mother and the mother chooses to leave.
Thank you, Connie. That's interesting because that was apparently the attitude of the German actress who refused to um, play Doll's House as it was written. And like I mentioned, Ibsen actually changed it, even though he disliked changing it. He thought it was a barbarous assault on the play, is what he called it, or I think it was called a barbarous violence that he did to play by changing it. But at the same time, people had those exact sentiments, and in some ways, Nora is treading where somebody like Medea had trodden before, right? So Medea is similar to Nora. She's a self-made woman. She's going to do what she's going to do. She's going to take revenge on her enemies, and in the process, even actually kills her children. So, but she has also been an icon of the feminist movement at the same time. And so you have these um, competing perspectives on what constitutes an admirable person, whether a woman or a man. And of course, some people have not taken this play to be necessarily an outlet for the feminist message. And I'll read you a quick excerpt from one of Ibsen's biographers, who says that, just 1 second here. Who says the following: "A Doll's House is no more about women's rights than Shakespeare's Richard II is about the divine right of kings, or An Enemy of the People about public hygiene. Its theme is the need of every individual to find the kind of person he or she really is and to strive to become that person." Now, that's one man's opinion. And, I'm curious if you agree with him or not. Is it really about a woman's role in society, or is it just about a human need to be a genuine person? And maybe that's Nora's quest, is to become something genuine. But I agree with Connie. It's not clear what that, or with Bob, it's not clear how you can be genuine if you're kind of neglecting in some ways your primary role as a mother. I mean, she has 3 children that she's going to leave behind, and she doesn't seem to bat an eye um, about that. So it does raise some questions. Right, while you're thinking, perhaps I found the actual speech of Ibsen's that he gave at the Festival of the Norwegian Women's Rights League. So this happened 20 years after the play was written in 1898. And this is what it says. I'll just read this real quick because it's not very long, but it is interesting. And I think, we have a kind of a unique opportunity to see what Ibsen himself is saying here. So as opposed to wondering what he actually thought. So he says, "I'm not a member of the Women's Rights League. Whatever I have written has been without any conscious thought of making propaganda. I have been more poet and less social philosopher than people generally seem inclined to believe. I thank you for the toast, but I must disclaim the honor of having consciously worked for the women's rights movement. I'm not quite clear as to just what this women's rights movement really is. To me, it has seemed a problem of humanity in general. And if you read my books carefully, you will understand this. True enough, it is desirable to solve the problem of women's rights, along with all the others. But that has not been the whole purpose. My task has been the description of humanity. To be sure, whenever such a description is felt to be reasonably true, the reader will insert his own feelings and sentiments into the work of the poet. These are attributed to the poet, but incorrectly so. This is, I think, is a great point, by the way. When you read anything, or when we read anything, we do tend to inject our own particular idiosyncrasies and stands, moral stands or whatever, into whatever we're reading. It's called confirmation bias, basically. So whatever we read, if we find something that we already believe, we kind of underline it. And we tend to discount things that contradict whatever we believe. And so Ibsen is very shrewd in pointing this out. And he says that when you do that, that's fine, no problem. Just don't attribute it to the author. The author is just giving you a description of humanity. Now, whatever you derive from that, that's your business, and you know you can claim that, but don't bring me into it, essentially. But this is, I want to read this final paragraph there because I think this is really interesting what he says. He says, the task always before my mind has been to advance our country and give the people a higher standard. To obtain this, two factors are of importance. It is for the mothers, by strenuous and sustained labor, to awaken a conscious feeling of culture and discipline. This must be created in men before it will be possible to lift the people to a higher plane. It is the women who are to solve the social problem. As mothers, they're to do it. And only as such can they do it. Here lies a great task for women. My thanks and success to the Women's Rights League. So this was his attitude. It was very interesting that he thought the mothers had this task, and women, in his mind, apparently, that was their primary way of achieving success and progressive, whatever, progress in society is through culture and discipline and the effect that they have on their children and their upbringing. So take it or leave it. This is Ibsen's speech at the Festival of the Norwegian Women's Rights League. So Kimberly, yeah, you raise a good point. Feminist versus humanist. Yeah, that's what's unclear to me. And I based on what I've read so far and kind of the research I've done on Ibsen, it seems to me that he was more on the humanist side than the feminist side. And they're obviously not mutually exclusive, obviously. It's both. But yeah, so it seems to me, yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, we could look at it from the cultural point of view, and the culture at that time and is men rule and women follow. But there's also the human. I don't know if it's a humanist side, but if you you mentioned that in the marriage she appeared to be very happy. She had all this stuff that was going on, and outside of the culture, what do you do in a marriage? You love each other. The man loves the woman, and the woman loves the man. And here she did something which is the husband was in trouble. What, he had ill health or something, and
Yes.
she did something tremendously loving. She took out a loan, which was questionable, questionable legally, I guess, or I don't know. It turned out that way, but it was tremendously loving. She must have invested a lot of herself into that. And what's going on? She's loving her husband, and she gets slapped in the face for it. So that is what hurts tremendously. And this doesn't have anything to do with feminism or masculinism. It could happen to in any situation where you're put down for where you're trying to do something great for the other person. It really hurts when you're trying to love somebody else and it doesn't work. It really hurts. So maybe she made a decision that she's going to walk out. Um, and she, I don't, maybe it doesn't go into all the reasons, and that's why we're talking about the play. A separate thought is, maybe this play should have had another act. What happens afterwards? What happens to the children? You could have Ibsen too, and write and have another act for the play.
Right, right. Yeah, we actually do have early drafts of this play and things, so we know what was changed and what was left from the original draft. And it's very interesting to see what Ibsen changed and what he left intact. Um, and so you can kind of see that the skeleton was there from the beginning, and there were some touches, some to make it more dramatic, essentially. But yeah, we do have his intent. I think he thought it was well-rounded and I guess completed. So he didn't. I guess he didn't feel that it was left anything unsaid, perhaps, or at least what he wanted to say in it. Now it doesn't answer all of our questions, or it seems this way, but it I guess it does answer what he wanted to say. Um, Act 2 or 3. Okay. Yeah. Um, so this is where, to me, let me give you a bit of my personal take on this play. So when I first read it, and I kind of forced myself to read anything we read several times, because what happens inevitably is I'll read something for the first time and I'll form some opinion of it. And when I read this for the first time, I did not have the most favorable opinion of it. And then I reread it. And then I went to do some additional research, and I thought, okay, I need to read it for another time because obviously I missed certain things. And as I started reading it more, I started liking it more. And here's why. So what Ibsen could have done, and maybe at a superficial reading, what it appears that he's doing is creating this kind of black and white picture of here's Nora and she's all good, and here's Thorvald and he's all kind of not so great. But when you look at Nora and who she really is a little more closely, it's pretty obvious that Ibsen does not paint her as this perfect character. She's anything but. When you really started analyzing her and reading the text, she is a very interesting person. Interesting in the sense that she is neither this nor that. She has parts of her that we admire, parts of her that, again, it depends on kind of what it is you admire in a person, right? But let me give you one example. So in the very beginning, we have her meet her old friend, Christine. Now, Christine is much less fortunate than Nora. Her husband dies, leaves her with nothing, and she was forced to take these odd jobs. Her future is uncertain. She is in trouble. And what does Nora do? Does she come around and kind of focus on her friend? Well, she sort of does. But if you read closely, the very first thing she says is, oh, this happened to you. And by the way, we were doing this. Oh, and your husband had uh, you know, passed away. So, and my husband also had this. So every time her friend mentions something, she redirects it to herself. And essentially, instead of, she's kind of she sounds like she is empathetic, but really all she's doing is retelling her own story, how everything really comes back to her. And finally, when Christine questions her a little bit and says, like, I understand, like, what are you doing and why are you doing this? Then Nora kind of unleashes on her and says, look, don't talk to me like this. Like, uh, I can help you, but you need to take me seriously. And don't tell me that I'm a child. Like, don't treat me like I'm a child. Don't be patronizing. And everything about her interaction with Christine doesn't leave the impression of a kind of person of Nora as a very sympathetic person, let me put it this way. She's very narcissistic. She is extremely obsessed with her own well-being. And of course, towards the end, we see that happening. She doesn't care about her kids. They don't even enter into the picture. In fact, she kind of excuses herself when she talks to her nurse, to her maid, who was her maid as a child. And now she's kind of asking her, do you think if my kids never saw me again, they'd remember me? It's a little bit of like it comes out in Act Two when she kind of mentions this possibility, and then says, no, 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 nonsense, like, don't worry about it that I asked you. But obviously she's already contemplating leaving. This is before the final showdown. This is before her husband behaves dishonorably in her mind, and thinks only about saving his own honor and his own position, his own reputation. So we have these little tidbits. Now that's her and Christine. Another super interesting relationship and interchange is with Dr. Rank. Dr. Rank is this old family friend. He's an older gentleman, and he is secretly in love with Nora. Now, Nora is all too happy. She knows that she's beautiful. She knows that she has this, what she calls uh, ravishing appeal, ravishing appeal. And so she uses that, and she is all too happy to exert this type of influence on other men, not just her husband. I mean, she definitely exerts it on her husband. Her husband is enamored with her. He is in love with her beauty, and that's great. But at the same time, she mentions, by the way, to her friend Christine that, I'm so ravishingly appealing that I could get money if I wanted to. And she's not talking about prostituting herself. She's just saying, like, I could ask somebody to give me money just because they like me. And of course, Dr. Rank is this person that she's probably thinking of, that she could ask him for money using her charms, if you will, and he would probably give her, or the way she mentions it, well, I think somebody could mention me in a rich old gentleman could mention me in his will, something like that, which is kind of crass when you think about it. Why should somebody give her this money just because she's pretty? She's somebody else's wife. She's not doing anything. And here's what happens. Dr. Rank visits their house, and she kind of flirts with him, and she says, "Oh, look, I'm going to wear these um what is it, uh gosh, stockings, sorry, I went blank. I'm going to wear these silk stockings." And she even kind of brushes his ear with these silk stockings, and then she says, what do you think, is this good? She's kind of flirting with him, and then he comes out and he says, I like, it's not just your husband who would give his life for you. I would do that too. And he basically comes out and says, not in so many words, but he says, I love you. And she is taken aback, and she doesn't like it anymore, because now it's not just a kind of what's left unsaid. It's all out in the open. And so she has responsibility now. She has incited certain feelings in this man, but she doesn't want that. She wants it all to be in this kind of Netherland, kind of the uncharted waters, neither this nor that. But as soon as it comes to a point, that's not good, right? Because now she has sort of a responsibility to say, what is she going to be? Is she going to be unfaithful to her husband, or is she going to be, become a lover of this man? What is happening here? So it's not clear to her, but she's also happy to take advantage of him while he is, to string him along, essentially, while the music is playing. So this is Nora. She is not the simple, innocent little plaything that she tells us she is. She's not just a doll in somebody else's house. She's scheming. She's doing things. She is making things happen. She's planning. She said, my husband, he's not always going to be enamored with my beauty. So I need to have this insurance, essentially, this secret that I have, as a way to pressure him perhaps in the future, or to have something. I need to have a chip in the game. This happens in Act One. So this is way before. I guess I'm kind of answering my own question about whether or not what happened in Act Three is unexpected. It's not totally unexpected. As you read a little closer, you see that there are signs of trouble in paradise way, way before Act Three. There are these little admissions that she makes along the way that kind of guide you to the finale. So here it is, Nora, the a little innocent Barbie in Barbie Land. All right, I've talked for long enough. Anyone else has any thoughts, questions, impressions? Maybe you have a different opinion and different interpretation of all this. Would love to hear from you if you want to share. Katie, go ahead.
I just had a small comment that would support his kind of more humanist orientation is that he seems to write not just on women's rights, but he seems to write on any of the social issues of his day. Like I wasn't there for the enemy of the people one, but that seemed to be another one about kind of social
Yeah,
commentary.
yeah, that's a great point, Katie. I actually thank you for bringing this up. Yes, I do have, I don't know, sorry. Somebody asked me about my mug. Yes, I have several of these. I love big mugs for tea. Uh, so anyway, yeah, so that's great, Katie. Thank you for bringing up Enemy of the People. It's a good comparison, and I agree with you. And perhaps I agree with Mike Meyer, the biographer, Ibsen's biographer, who says that, these plays are not about a specific issue. They're about human nature and humanity in different contexts. So in Enemy of the People, it's not really so much about, what's the right way to administer water hygiene in a municipality. It's more about what do you do when you are in the situation where you know something and society is pressuring you to keep it secret, but you know that it's not right. And do you sacrifice your family for it? What do you do? Do you go along with it? That's Enemy of the People. This one is different, right? This one is, what do you do when you feel like your life is not genuine, perhaps? When you feel that society imposes certain expectations on you, and yet you feel that that's not who you really are. But maybe that's a different question, though, that's being asked here. I'm not quite convinced that's the question that Ibsen is asking, because it seems to me that there's a lot more here about relationships than about some social ills or social issues. It's more about trust and um, dynamics of a relationship. And we have two couples, right? We have Thorvald and Nora, and we have Christine and Krogstad. So as Nora is leaving Thorvald, Christine and Krogstad are actually thinking of becoming a couple, right? Getting married. And there it's Krogstad is interesting too. He said he's using his knowledge of this bad loan, the forgery, to essentially blackmail Nora and her husband. But at the same time, he is himself a forger. That's why he is about to lose his job at this bank, because he has done some unsavory things in his own past. But despite all of that, he seems to be a kind of person that Christine, this, you know, another version of what a woman is in society, a less fortunate woman, perhaps. She is all too happy to take him in and to say, look, let's join forces. Your kids need a mother, I need a husband, and, let's give it a go. So we have these parallel tracks that are happening in this play. All right, anyone else have any insights for us? While you're thinking, I'll give you another little anecdote about this. So I was looking at the draft and trying to compare it to the final version. and there were some interesting additions and changes in the draft versus the final version. So in the draft, when Thorvald finally reads Krogstad's letter that says, I'm not gonna pursue this. You guys are okay. Like I decided not to pursue this because of Christine and so on. Thorvald exclaims, "We are saved." That's in the draft. But later, Ibsen changed this, and he changed it to, "I am saved." So he made it sound like he wanted him to sound more selfish. He wanted him to be more concerned about his own reputation, his own everything. And then Nora asks about herself. She says, "What about me?" Well, yeah, of course, you too. But I am saved. So that seems to be an important change that he wants to underscore, that Thorvald is indeed egotistical in all of this, and he is kind of concerned about his reputation and not as much concerned about his wife, and that perhaps is good grounds for her to leave. So that's one. Another interesting interchange that was removed was Dr. Rank. Dr. Rank is also a very interesting character. He makes some comments about Krogstad, and he says, "You know what? This guy is a moral disease, and he should be removed. He should be fired." And so when Nora asks, "Well, don't you feel any pity for him?" And so it's always the people that are these sort of degenerates that get all the pity. What happens to all the normal people? Normal people never get the pity. It's always the people that are in troublemakers. And then he says, in the woods, you have these trees that grow well, and you have these other trees that are deformed. And the deformed trees eventually die, and the good trees, they kind of use these deformed trees to take their life juices and make themselves stronger. He says, "What our ills in society are because we're always trying to help the people that are um, uh, not benign, that are diseased. We're always trying to help them, and therefore, instead of progressing, we're regressing in society." So this was in the draft, and Ibsen removed it. I'm not sure why he removed it, because it was an interesting characteristic of Dr. Rank to kind of round him off as an interesting character. So that's another anecdote I have. Connie, go ahead.
Yeah, this is making me think too, going back to the generation, which in the beginning of the discussion, the chat about women not being able to get a credit card, which certainly fit into my age group. I'm elderly. And I remember when I first graduated from high school, then to go on to college, but high school want ads were help wanted men, help wanted female, help wanted male. There was that division. So you can just imagine that age. But I'm thinking, so I've gone through a lot of this women's rights and whatever within my lifetime, and see some of the downfalls, I think, now more that can arise from that. But what I'm thinking of is the responsibility of anyone to our society. And had a man, uh, for example, her husband just one day said, "I don't want to support my family anymore. I want to go out and find true love or whatever," and was flirting with, women at work or something, they would be really, we would be, I don't think there'd be almost any discussion at how disgusting that is. I think we'd all be going, "What a creep. He did this to his wife, and now she gets 40 and he wants to trade her in for two 20-year-olds." But
Happens all the
uh,
time.
I'm just saying, yeah, uh, I just find her to be extremely immature, and I just think this couldn't even be written in reverse, because it would be the men would have no one pitying them should they desire to just do their thing in the middle of a marriage with small children. Thank you. I hope I'm not ruffling any feathers.
I hope you are. That's the whole point of this. Ruffle some feathers and have a good discussion. Kimberly, go ahead.
Yeah, I put a thing in the chat earlier, but related to the recent comment about like having access to financial stuff. I got out of high school and my mother um divorced my father because he had mental health issues. She had no credit whatsoever. And so I got a job at 3M right out of high school. And I went to college. They paid for all my college, but I had to go to the credit union to get. First, I went to the 3M had a bank, their own bank at that time, but they would not give me credit because I had no credit. My mother had no credit. And then I went to the credit union and they go like, "Oh, we'll give you credit," and I bought a car. I have banked with them since I've been 18 years old.
Hmm.
It's amazing. It's just like sometimes people just need to take a chance on people. You know, life is
Yeah.
not all about bad circumstances. Sometimes people just things just happen to people in life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what's interesting about Krogstad. Like what he's a good example of this, right? He made a few mistakes in his life. And so what do you do with a person like that? Do you completely throw them to the wolves? That's what Thorwald wants to do. Thorwald
Right,
is the Boy Scout. He's always done the right thing. So there are people that
right,
always do the right thing, and there are people that are kind of like these loose cannons. Um, and it's tricky, right? If you always encourage, if you say there's no consequences, then society probably is not going to do so well. But at the same time, you need to give people like Krogstad a chance. Now, Dr. Rank wants them to become food for for the Boy Scouts, and he wants the Boy Scouts to use the resources of people like that, and let them just die off. Um, so that probably is not the right answer either, the social Darwinism type of take. But yeah, where do you draw the line? It's tricky. And Ibsen
right,
is I think he's touching on these issues of
right.
second chances and um yeah, and Thorwald is all too quick to write off Nora, right? When her deceit or this great sin of hers, right? That she went behind his back and procured this loan, when it becomes apparent, when he reads this letter from Krogstad that exposes her, he writes her off. He says, "You are no good." He is too quick to just completely forget all of his loving, um, appeals to her and, my little lark, my little songbird, my this, my that. No, 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 you are a terrible person. And this is probably, obviously Ibsen dramatizes this. It doesn't happen like this in real life. I doubt that it happened exactly like that with Victor and Laura Keeler, who were the prototypes for this play. But that's the point: is you have to maybe perhaps be a little more forgiving and understanding that people sometimes do things they are forced to do, and perhaps Nora did the right thing in saving her husband's life. What should she have done? Let him die? I mean, that's kind of obvious, right? That she probably did the right thing, and she had to do what she had to do. She hid it.
Right.
She forged her father's signature. She did a lot of things that were questionable, but if we look at it from a standpoint of like, was it ethically good? Probably. So now her leaving the kids and leaving and trying to find her new life and all that, that's what throws kind of casts a shadow on her character and makes us wonder. And the fact that she is using her charms and but again, probably, I can argue either way, right? You can argue like women use what they can. Men use their muscles and women use their looks, whatever, whatever works, right? We all have tools that God has given us, and we use what we have. So she's using her,
Or women use their brains.
and,
So,
and and she does use her brains. Absolutely, she is very scheming. I mean, she is, and I say scheming not in a bad way. She plans ahead. She has an exit strategy for her old age when she's no longer pretty. She has, so she is definitely not this simpleton, not this little plaything that perhaps she describes herself as. But I have to say though, she also is a great actress. If she doesn't really feel the way she feels, she tells Thorwald that she's always felt uneasy with him and she wanted to prove him. And she is she's a good actress. Uh, because the way she reacts to her children, I mean, I was taken in. You know, when I first was reading this, I was like, man, she, you know, what a great idyllic life. She has this maid that's taking care of her kids. She has another maid in the house. Um, what's not to love? But apparently, no. Mike, do you have any insights for us? You're unusually silent tonight. Perhaps Mike is doing something. All right. Yeah, I'm not sure. All right. Well, I think we've covered a lot of our bases here. I don't have a whole lot more to contribute, so I'll leave you. I'll let you have another chance if you have any final thoughts or uh, any questions that you might want to ask or ask the group. Otherwise, I guess we'll get ready to wrap this up.
So what's the next session that you're organizing?
I believe it's Brecht's Life of Galileo.
Okay.
Yeah, Bertolt Brecht's Galileo,
Okay.
which will be the next one. And then
Okay.
we'll have some, I think it will be Miller and some other, yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, very good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining tonight. I really enjoyed seeing you all here and discussing this interesting play. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Philip.
All right. Have a good evening.